Hey guys, Colin here at the Deep Tissue Massage Center to show you a series of stretches that can help you with limited range of motion in your shoulder. In particular, we're targeting two different ranges of motion. One's called internal rotation, and that means that if you have your elbow by your side, you're trying to bring your arm internally or in toward the center of your body. And if your arm is up here, so you're starting with your arm here, again, bringing it down, bring your hand down toward the trunk of your body. In both cases, you're trying to rotate the upper arm inwardly. So oftentimes muscles in the back of the shoulder that are very tight are going to restrict that motion. We're going to target those as well as muscles that tend to restrict your external rotation or external range of motion. So that would be your hand being at the midline of your body and bringing it away from your body, like so. Or the opposite of what we were doing here, where you start with your arm down here and you bring it up this direction. So we're going to start with the external rotation or external range of motion, this range here. What I'm going to have you do is use a pinky ball, and you're going to be using this on your upper chest and the front of your shoulder. And what we're going to be targeting is tight areas and tender areas. So if you were to draw a line just across or feel across your chest here with just the pads of your fingers, you would feel at a certain point a little divot and then the front of your shoulder here. So where that divot is, that's about where we're looking, and that's just a little bit below the collarbone here. So just down about here. Now this upper chest muscle runs kind of like this at an angle, so it could be more tender down here, it could be more tender up here in that divot. So what I'm going to have you do is just take the rubber ball, and you can use a little cross ball. It's usually a little harder and it can cause a little more discomfort. So I just use a pinky ball here. And I'm just going to lean a little bit into the door frame, looking for a tender spot. Now to find a tender spot, I'm going to give just a little bit of forward pressure, not a ton. We're trying to just get a good sore rather than create a painful experience here. So I'm going to just lean in. I've got it in that divot. I'm going to bend my knees a little bit just to come up and down, looking for a tender spot as I push inward. And then I'm also going to move my hips side to side a little bit. So that also lets me look for a tender spot. When you find a tender spot, what you're going to do, or a spot that feels tight or bound up to you, what you're going to do is you're going to just hang out in this position, again, only using as much pressure as what gives you kind of a good sore feeling. And you're going to take about 5 deep breaths. When you take those deep breaths and you breathe out, what I want you to do is try and imagine the musculature around where the pressure of the ball is opening up, kind of letting the pressure of the ball in, letting that area soften. You're going to do that for 5 breaths. Then you're going to, again, look around, same thing, bending the knees, rolling side to side, looking for another spot. So ideally you want to find at least a couple spots in through this area, this divot area, down a little bit into the chest here where it feels really tight or tender. Then you're going to move on to the front shoulder, because both of these muscles will tend to rotate the arm inward, and what we're trying to do is get this upper arm to rotate outward. So we're going to open up the front shoulder. Same deal, except now you're just putting the ball right on the front of the shoulder, and if you follow your arm bone upward, this becomes your shoulder. So same thing in the door jamb, same idea as before, bending the knees to move up and down a little bit, going side to side a little bit by moving your hips, looking for those tender spots, taking the deep breaths into them for a count of 5, deep breaths, and letting that go. So now that you've let that go, now we'll move on to a stretch in particular that can be helpful for this external range of motion. So the first thing I'm going to have you do, this is going to be a doorway stretch. Now usually a doorway stretch would involve getting your arm up like this to stretch out the upper chest area. Now for a lot of people, getting your arm up to that position when you have limited range of motion is next to impossible. So it's okay if your arm's down like this. It's okay if it's in this position. Go to the range that you can first do comfortably. So if it's just to here, I just put my arm like this, and I'll step forward with the same side leg, keeping my shoulders nice and square, looking straight ahead until I feel a stretch through the chest and upper or front shoulder here. And if that's easy to do, then I'll bring my arm from this position to this position. And you're just going to keep kind of working it like that until it feels like that's about as much as I can go. Now, when you get to the point where it feels like that's about as much as I can go, we're going to add one more thing. And this is called muscle energy technique. It's called PNF. It's called strain counter strain. Got a lot of different names to it, but basically what you're doing is you are telling the muscle that it's holding too tight by over contracting it a little bit and then allowing it to stretch to a greater length. And that tells your brain and your nervous system to reset the length of the muscle. So the way you do this is you can do this with a wall stretch at any point, even if you're down here. All you're going to do is you're going to push. Once you get into that stretch, you're going to then contract these muscles that we're stretching. So we're stretching them, then we're contracting them. So that simply means I'm going to push forward with this arm. If my hand's here, I'm going to push forward with it like this. Okay, you're going to push forward for 5 seconds using light to moderate pressure. So I'm stepping forward, getting a good stretch through here, not painful, and now I'm going to just push forward with my arm against the door jamb. So I'm now contracting the muscle here. I'm going to hold out for a count of 5, take a deep breath, and then let it relax. And I'm going to see if I can lean a little bit farther forward or take my step a little bit farther forward. And I'm going to do this 3 to 5 times. Or you could also try bring your arm up a little bit and doing it again. And then again, with a push, relax. Push for 5 seconds, relax for 5 seconds, and let it stretch. What that does, like I said, is it resets the length of the muscle. So that's what we're doing to get this external range of motion going here and here. So once you've done this, you can, if you want, then put your elbow against your side, start with your hand kind of on the midline of your body and see how far out you can go. Now you may want to start with doing this in the beginning before you even do these stretches to see the improvement for afterwards. So you can test it this way, and then the other way I would suggest testing it is with your arm just kind of like this. You may not be able to get your elbow up very high on the wall. Maybe it's just to here. And then you're just going to slowly bring your arm up as far as you can go. So another way you can also work this, if you're not going to do it in the doorway like this, is you could, with your arm like this, bring it up like this. And in order to contract and relax these muscles, you would push down with the restricted arm and into the palm of the other hand that's pushing up. And you just, again, light pressure, hold it for 5 seconds, let it relax, and then you would slowly just kind of lift this arm up a little bit more if you can with the supporting hand. Push down with the top hand again, 5 seconds, light to moderate pressure, let that relax. So you can try this at a lot of different angles. So we're going to also include something similar when we're trying to get more internal range of motion. So that's what we're going to move to next. So now we're going to address what we call internal range of motion, and that is bring your arm from out here inward or from up here downward. So the muscles that restrict that would be the muscles on the back of your shoulder. There's a couple in particular, one that we're going to focus on first, and that's called the teres minor. So the teres minor is a little muscle that runs from right about here. You can see where my armpit is right about there. It runs from a little bit behind there to the back of my shoulder right in here. It actually runs a little farther than that, but as far as using the ball on it, we're going to be targeting a little bit farther back here and just keep running it along here using the ball along this line. So how do you get the ball there? You got to put the ball in a sock. I'm going to put it in a pillowcase here. And then you throw it over your shoulder. Throw it over your shoulder, you're finding that location. So I'm just kind of looking around here, and I'm going to have to lean back against the wall a little bit, but I am looking for this area near where my armpit is, just above that and a little behind it to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm then going to lean backwards into the wall. Same rule of thumb as working the whole front upper chest area. And front shoulder is that you want to use light to moderate pressure. It should feel like a good sore. Most people are going to feel this quite a bit. So again, I'm rolling side to side by moving my hips from side to side. I can also go up and down by bending my knees. I'm looking for the most tender or tight spot. This usually jumps out at people when we're working on the teres minor. So find those tender spots. Again, do the 5 deep breaths. Try and let your body relax into it with each out breath. You can hold a tender spot for 30 seconds or more if you want, and just hang out there until it feels like it starts to dissolve or open up. So there's not any hard and fast rule of thumb as to how long you work it. I'm just trying to give you a stretch routine that you can do within a reasonable amount of time. So once you've released one, then I would suggest that you, like I said, we're working along this line right here from back here over to here. So you first work here, so above the armpit and behind a little bit, right? Then I'm moving right to here, just above the armpit area. Then I'm moving right over to here, which is a little to the outside of that armpit area above it. So I'm going to work each of those just like I showed you. You can also take this and work the back of the shoulder, so right in here as well. I'm not going to demonstrate that right now because it's usually not one of the areas that inhibits that motion quite as much, but you can easily work that. You can use this around any area and through the back of the shoulder that feels like it's really tight. Okay, so for this next part, you're going to need a table to lie on. I'm working on my left shoulder, so I'm going to lay on my left side with my right shoulder pointing up toward the ceiling. I'm going to bring my elbow and just rest it on the table. I'm going to actually bring it up so that it's in line with my shoulder here. Now, you may have trouble bringing your arm out to the side. That might be difficult to do even in this position. If that's the case, then just bring your elbow up as high as you can, and that's fine. And then we'll do the rest of the stretch from there. I'm going to bring it up just in line with my shoulder just for demonstration purposes. Now, this is the same sort of strain, counter strain that I had mentioned where we're resetting the length of the muscle. So in order to do this, what I'm going to have you do is internally rotate, which means you're bringing your arm down toward the table. I'm laying on my side, so it puts me in a better position to be able to do this more easily than if I was laying on my back. So say, for instance, this is as far as I can go. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to use this top hand over the top of the arm and side that we're stretching, and I'm going to push down, just light to moderate pressure, toward the table while I push back with the side I'm stretching. So we're basically creating some resistance, and you will feel the muscles in the back of your shoulder that you were just stretching with the ball fire up a little bit or contract a little bit. We want them to. You're going to hold it like that for 5 seconds. Take a deep breath in. As you breathe out, you're going to see if you can let your hand and arm, lower arm, forearm area, drop a little farther down toward the table. You're going to do the same thing again, pushing back, light to moderate pressure, resisting, so that you're giving yourself some good resistance there. And another breath in, and you're going to release that and see if you can go a little bit farther with it. You're going to do this about 5 times. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up and reset the length of these muscles in the back of the shoulder that are restricting this internal range. Then from there, if you want, you can lay on your back. You could do this also standing up, but you would then be checking your range of bring your arm out to the side and inward, or you could bring your elbow out to the side as far as you can. Maybe this is as far as you can go, that's fine. And you'd be bringing your hand as if you're facing your palm toward your feet. You'll be bringing it downward toward the table. You can also do that same type of contract, relax exercise in this position too. It's just harder to do. But as your shoulder starts to stretch out, it might be as you bring your elbow up and you can only get your arm to here, that this gives you a better stretch, that you relax, give some resistance here, and you're pushing back with this hand, pushing down with the other hand, and you would follow the same rule of thumb that I gave you before. So that is the basis of that whole part of the routine of getting those ranges to open. And I'm just going to show two other stretches that you can add in there to continue to open up some other ranges that we want to address. So this group of stretches are simply called wall crawls, and they're pretty standard with a lot of physical therapy. The first one is to try and get your range of motion of lifting your arms straight in front of your body for what they call forward flexion. And all you're going to do is start with your hand out in front of you and with your arm fairly straight here. You can have a slight bend in the elbow, but you want it to be fairly straight. And you're just going to crawl with your fingers up the wall to get to the point where you start to feel some restriction in the shoulder. Once you feel that restriction, all you're going to do is you're going to hang out, try and let the shoulder area relax as much as you can, and see if you can go a little bit higher. You want to stay within a range that's still a good sore. If it's painful, you don't want to be in that range because it can cause the muscles to have a rebound effect and want to contract to protect the joint. So we want a good sore. That signals the muscles to start to open. So you find that area, that's great. Another thing you can do is once you find that area, you can, in this case I'm facing straight toward the wall as I'm doing this. I'm just turning to look at the camera here. But what you can then do once you've found a range where you feel like, wow, okay, that's a really good stretch and you've hung out there a little bit, is that you can then just bend your knees a little bit so that you don't have to crawl your arm up higher, but you are creating more of an angle. And as you do that, you'll feel some of the muscles in through this area start to stretch. So this gets some of the back muscles and other muscle that internally rotates to stretch out. So the other stretch is a wall crawl that's to the side. So if you have to start down here, that's fine. And again, same thing. Now I'm facing this way. This is called abduction. Bring my arm away from my body, and I'm just simply going to crawl up the wall here, keeping my arm fairly straight as I do that, to a point where I feel, maybe you feel an impingement up here, or you feel tightness or pain through the top of your shoulder. Maybe you're feeling it through here, maybe you're feeling it down here. Doesn't matter. Once you get to that point, you're just going to hang out. And again, we want this to be a good sore area. Take some deep breaths into there. Try and imagine that area that's tight or that you feel tight or restrictive opening up. It's like a visualization that you're doing. Then you can either try and crawl up a little higher, or you can bend your knees. And that creates a little bit more of an angle in this stretch. And again, hang out there. Once you get to that point where you're feeling the good sore again, you just try and let that open.